Hello listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing you the most topical energy matters in an informal setting. My name is Richard Sverrisson. I'm joined today by my colleague Olav Vilnes, Montel's Nordic Chief Editor, and our guest today is Alexandra Münzer, Managing Director of Greenfact. A warm welcome to you, Alexandra.
Hello, hi everyone.
I thought we could start today, Alexandra, about sort of discussing about Greenfact. You know, who are you and what do you do?
Greenfact, we are a market information, market intelligence company for the green OTC market in general, but with a very special focus on guarantees of origin.
Mm-hmm. If we could talk about the guarantees of origin market more generally, how large is this market? Who are the main actors involved? Who are the main sort of participants here?
You have a market with a supply of yearly 600 terawatt hours. That was in 2018, and you have a market that is basically dominated by fundamental market players, so producers of renewable energy on one hand side and suppliers of green electricity on the other side. And then you have very special roles of Norway and Germany, because a huge chunk of the supply, roughly 30%, comes from Norwegian hydro, and the Germans are the biggest consumers of green energy.
Of these guarantees of origin. So
exactly.
600 terawatt hours, that's about equivalent to the annual power demand of Germany, maybe a little bit more?
Yes, but Germany, they cancel, so meaning used last year 100 terawatt hours. So that means, of course.
This is for guarantees of origin.
Guarantees of origin.
I'm talking total power demand. I mean, in the whole country, I think it's over 500, 600. So this is the total green market is equivalent to the total.
Okay. Yes.
In that sense.
True.
Yeah. Perfect. If we could then move on to a little bit about prices, Alexandra. The prices of GOs from sort of Nordic hydropower, which is, if I understand it correctly, an industry benchmark, they spiked at more than €2 last autumn, but have fallen heavily this year. Why is that?
Yeah, why is that? Why were they so high in the first place? Maybe let's start from there. So we had last year this exceptional dry and hot weather in the Nordics. So Nordics, as I mentioned, or Norwegian hydro makes almost 30% of the certificate supply. And then you had this very dry summer and hydro reservoir levels and such, they were pretty low. So you had sort of a shortage in supply. Of course, weather turned back to normal basically this year, but actually, to be honest, we in Greenfact, we did not anticipate that it would go down that low. So we have now prices of below 30 cents for the spot year. For the future, I mean, depends, up to 80 cents, but for the spot, 27.5 or something. Why was the market, or is the market so bearish this year? A couple of factors, what we could call the one-time factors that came into play this year. First, we had France announcing their auctions for supported renewable energy. The year before, we had a situation very similar to Germany. So they supported assets were not allowed to receive guarantees of origin. Maybe triggered from the nice high prices that they saw last year. So they changed the legal framework a bit in France. So they started auctioning supported guarantees of origin, bringing every year into the market about 45 terawatt hours.
Huge amount.
Which is,
When you say supported, you mean the ones that are already receiving subsidies?
Exactly. Exactly. Because the idea in Germany, for instance, they have the so-called Doppelvermarktungsverbot, meaning if the taxpayer basically already pays for assets to support them, then they should not need to pay for the green as well.
But then, sorry, I interrupted you, Alexandra. You were talking about the development this year in the French geos. I mean, the French auctions, we'll come back to that, but that's been a main sort of downward pressure on market on the prices.
Yes, that was I think that was the most important contributor to the bearish sentiment in the market this year. And a bit later, towards the end of the year, Serbia and Slovakia became full members of the AIB, so Association of Issuing Bodies. That means they can now trade and sell their GOs much easier. They bring another 16 terawatt hours into the market.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
Without, in France, of course, you can say there will be more and more demand in France because green energy suppliers go more and more green default. There are more and more green offerings in the country because they are very, climate conscious as well. And green shift is also growing in France. If you go more to the east, it's a question basically when they join the AIB, you can actually assume at least in the next years that they would more contribute on the supply side and not on the demand side.
Okay, so the demand is sort of inching up, but maybe in Eastern Europe is not so big.
What I've heard in the past is that we've had a lot of demand over many years, 2-digit demand growth every year.
Yes, 10%-ish.
Yeah. And a lot is probably driven by the companies that want to portray themselves as renewable. So what you say in a way is that supply is reacting by new countries coming into the system.
Yeah.
So that makes it probably a bit difficult to estimate the balance.
Very difficult to estimate the balance because not so much from the supply side, because from the supply side it's rather clear. So you have the natural growth of renewables and renewable capacity. What else could happen? You have a new country joining the AIB, and we already have all countries with a big renewable supply in the AIB. So maybe another Eastern European country with 5 TWh joins. Okay, that's not a big thing, right? Or you can have a legal something happening in the legal framework, as we saw in France there. So that's the supply side. You can, make scenarios and quantify it. The demand side, of course, that's much more difficult. So you have the biggest demand driver is basically electricity suppliers switching to green default, meaning they, of course, they sort of have the pressure from people like you and me. We want to be green. We want to have a low carbon footprint. So the green offerings become, more and more throughout, in the several countries. You have Austria being vast extent they are green. Even in Spain, more and more green default suppliers. Then you can even see it in Iceland or in Norway, actually, that households like you and me, we get more and more green electricity. Electricity suppliers, they contribute the most to the demand side, and then you have the businesses. And they, a couple of years back, it was not significant at all, but this is changing right now because you do see particularly this RE100 organization calls for the Fortune 5000 companies to be 100% green. And then they are also very transparent with what tools to achieve. And we're talking here about scope 2, emissions and emissions from green electricity or from the procurement of electricity, let's put it that way. Next year we will see, according to our estimate, they will contribute from a demand side 60 terawatt hours next year.
The RE100 companies, these companies.
Just the RE100, there are 207 companies. They are growing like crazy, like 5 companies or such every month.
And these are big sort of data companies, energy suppliers. I mean, you name it. These are household names mostly, aren't they? These companies?
They are the big, the Googles of the world.
Absolutely.
Exactly. They have a significant electricity demand in Europe that makes 60 terawatt hours, 50-60 next year. That's a tenth of the supply in the market. So this is becoming significant.
When you had the price spike last year, for example, do you see that these kind of companies pull back from the market, or are they very still there and willing to buy just to portray a greener image?
That's a good question. From the companies, I don't know, because you see it. Basically, you see the numbers of these RE100 companies still growing every month. You cannot quantify, okay, there is the stagnation or anything. But what we saw, also talking with a lot of our clients in Germany, that there was a pullback, basically. Because if you're a green electricity supplier, some of them, supplied, they switched because it was cheap. So they switched to green electricity in, let's say, end of 17 or in 2017 and supplied green electricity to their industry clients as well as to the household clients. Okay, household clients are sensitive. They want to be green. The industry, if it's getting pricey, they'll think double. So some of them, because of the pressure from the industry clients, they switched back. So they gave the cheaper tariffs to the industry clients then. But as soon as the prices are down again,
then they come back in, You mentioned the RE100s, and one of the ways that they kind of procure or source their green energy is through power purchase agreement, PPAs. Do you see that also as a big demand driver for guarantees of origins to become green?
It's a demand driver. It's a way to become green. PPAs are increasingly popular. They don't make the biggest chunk, I would say, when it comes to the demand in the market. But what the PPAs definitely do is take away basically the volumes from the OTC market, right?
Okay.
Of course, we do some consultancy and report services for PPA parties and such as well. We sort of need the price transparency also in the OTC markets. But definitely, if you want to do a PPA, if it shall be a green PPA, then you need to have the guarantees of origin in what form ever. You know, if in the Netherlands, of course, you put a price on it because their guarantees of origin are pricey, above 6 euros, 7 euros per megawatt hour. In the Nordics, maybe it comes on top.
What are your expectations for next year, Alexandra, in terms of prices?
For next year, I mean, since we are a market analysis company, we really have to look at the things that you can quantify. And as I said, the demand side is really tricky to quantify. There we really have to see how things will develop in the future, if the energy-intensive industry is coming in as a new demand driver, hopefully. But that's that. But if you just look at the fundamentals and the factors that you can quantify, then we don't see a big difference to this year. So it could be that the prices still remain for the benchmark for Nordic Hydro rather low. But you have...
Sub 30 or above 30 cents, you know?
Well, we do have now, I think, future prices of 50, 60 cents. But we think that this is probably, you know, the spread becomes more narrow between the spot and the forward years. So next year probably it would come down a bit.
The forwards will come down, but the spot come up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't see much support for the prices. But if you look at the historical data, growth of renewables and growth of demand that we saw in the past years, actually the demand side is growing a little bit faster than the supply side. So that could mean we really think that in the middle of this decade, we could see, just looking at the fundamentals, that there might be support for the prices again, and we would see it coming up. But that's, of course, excluding all one-time factors, so-called one-time factors, and excluding, you know, the demand from energy-intensive industries, demand from more and more corporates that want to be green.
Yeah, and of course also this market is very fragmented. I mean, you do have, of course, the Nordic hydropower as a benchmark in a way, but you also have a lot of products, a lot of different prices.
Exactly.
Dutch wind, for example, solar.
Exactly.
Can you give us some explanation of the spread there in prices?
Huge spread, and thanks for mentioning this, actually what we see, one of the trends we see is that even within a country there might be big spreads depending on the locations of the asset. So if the location is close to an urban area, let's say like next to Hamburg, and new post-subsidy wind farm in Germany next to Hamburg, or next to Amsterdam, nice offshore wind farm, and the suppliers are able to market this asset-specific electricity, you know, as a really nice asset-specific tariff, and people, they want to identify with renewable energy, they want to contribute. And already in the Netherlands, we do see different prices for these kind of assets there. So that might be, that will come in the future, that really, depending on your marketing, depending where the asset is, you will see different prices. And as you said, in the Netherlands, we do have prices now €6.30 for spot wind. And yes, in Germany, next year, or the year after next year, 2021, you will have post-subsidy assets coming into the system, so they don't receive support from government anymore, but will be able to receive guarantees of origin. And what we expect is basically similar picture to what we see in the Netherlands now in Germany, because the Germans, they like to have their own guarantees of origin, their domestic ones.
And there's a willingness to pay for this local green energy. That's you know, because it's quite substantially higher than, say, Nordic hydropower.
It's now, I heard of a client of ours having solar assets, and he gets 2 to 3 euros per megawatt hour for the German solar asset. Yeah.
Is there also now the factor coming in next year when some of the first renewable assets that came online in Germany 20 years ago, the feed-in tariff system is ending? Will that also boost supply of GOs in Germany, or is that too simplistic of you?
No, I mean, that's of course the first thing that comes up your mind. Of course, there is a lot of, I mean, the country is producing 200 terawatt hours renewables. If that that all falls out the subsidy, of course, that would be a lot, but realistically it's much less because you have old assets not operational anymore and so forth. On average, on a yearly average, until 2030, you will see about 4 terawatt hours every year, which is negligible when you compare it to the huge demand that is basically there in Germany, the 100 terawatt hours right now. So it's nothing. So actually owning one of these assets that is eligible for guarantees of origin in a nice area in Germany, that's really something nice.
Yeah,
to have.
absolutely. But you mentioned the energy intensive industry earlier in Germany. I mean, they get a lot of their carbon costs compensated for. Do you see any change in that? And could that develop? Maybe could that boost demand for guarantees of origin if these big companies want to be green? I mean, Germany is the industrial heartland of Europe still, so there's potential is huge.
The potential is huge, not only in Germany, also of course in the Nordics, where you have a lot of energy intensive industry. The problem is, of course, the B2C industry, the customer facing ones. They care, they have the pressure from you and me, from the households, from the end customers to become green, to be carbon neutral and sustainable and all that. Then you have the B2C industry in Germany and wherever, basically, the B2B that actually, but they deliver raw material, for instance, to the B2C industry. And in the end, the end consumer is, they get smarter. We just get smarter. We understand, okay, that's direct emissions, that's indirect emissions. And at some point, the customer of the B2C industry will request their supply chain to be green as well, and that will put the pressure on the B2B industry and the energy intensive industry.
What do you think about the credibility for the market in that sense? I mean, if you have these kind of price developments, very bumpy ride that you had last year into this year, does it show that there is an immature market, that it doesn't really...
No, it is an immature market. That's just as it is. You have a market, low liquidity, low transparency, depending on, then you have a naturally heterogeneous market. So that means depending on the sub-market, the liquidity even varies and the price transparency varies. So it's really what this market needs, actually, some professional market players coming into the market, more transparency, increasing the liquidity. And then what I believe we could also see much more stability when it comes to the price. It's not what we saw last year that, just buying, if you now go to the market and signal buying interest for 500 gigawatt hours, that already, influences the prices quite a lot. Just one deal, basically.
How do you then boost the liquidity or transparency? How do you go about achieving that?
Greenfact, we contribute to certain transparency in the market. Then you do have price transparency coming from the auctions themselves. You see in France, you can go log in, see the auction results. They are close to the OTC prices. You see the Italian auctions. The Croatians do have auctions. So basically, there are more and more, public prices available. Then we have price platforms, This helps the price transparency. So you're not only depending on calling your broker, for instance, as it was 3 years back, basically. But the liquidity, now we have really market participants very fundamentally. The supply, the electricity suppliers buying once a year, buying twice a year. And the producers selling if they have to, or if they can achieve a good price, but you don't have any traders or participants like this in the market.
Is it a way then, when you talk about this auctions, some critics of the auctions have said that it is a way of commoditizing the GOs, that is not the right way to do it, that it is not a commodity? Do you agree with that view, that you have to treat it more like guarantees of origin, that should have different prices according to its quality?
If it's a commodity or not a commodity, that's probably it's not a commodity, but we treat it as a commodity. But on the other hand side, if you go down back to the roots of the guarantees of origin, it's never meant to be a support mechanism or anything. It was just there to give the consumer in the end a choice between electricity products. With the opening, liberalization of the electricity market, simply said, nothing more than a tracking mechanism. That's still what it is, right? But prices vary because demand varies for different products. It's just what it is.
I mean, this week we saw Microsoft and Vattenfall launch a platform to track the origin of power production on an hourly basis, as opposed to yearly that happens today. So how do you view this development? Is this an element of the market becoming more professional as you see it? Or,
that is what exactly you ask for, what can you do to make the market more liquid? If you sort of are more time sensitive, basically, if you require from the electricity suppliers, instead of, disclosing their source of electricity once a year, which is the rule now, you do it like much, let's say monthly. So you're much closer actually on the power market and on the, so much more sensitive when it comes to the time. That would, of course, increase the work for the suppliers, that they don't want to do it because that would mean a lot of administrational work. But in the end, it would be nice for the market because you have increased liquidity. Also, another benefit would be it might give them more credibility because then you have, a product that is much more, now you trade it absolutely independent of the physical electricity. But if you link it a bit more, it also gives a better, feeling and more credibility probably for clients.
Because this is part of some of the criticism of the geo system, that it lacks that credibility because it's not physically linked. I mean, I think there are, Olav, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some moves within the opposition party in Norway to make inroads into this.
That's the proposal that will be put to Parliament this winter on the Norwegian Labour Party, that it proposed to sort of limit Norwegian exports of geos to the amount of available transmission capacity. Just to have a clear physical link. But it's a controversial proposal. I don't know if it will ever be approved. What do you think about such a proposal? I mean, surely you will take away a lot of supply from the market, higher prices.
Yeah, so that's all. Yes, exactly. That's why some people always ask me, what do you think if Norway leaves the market? Me personally, for the market would be really nice. Then you have much higher prices. The market would be taken much more serious. So it's not only a left-hand job from some people, that actually mainly trade power, and then on a Friday afternoon they buy some geos. Then there is some value in the market, of course. But what the guarantees of origin market needs on a European level is just to have much more uniform laws and regulations. They should not, the countries, they should not be allowed actually to do all their special thing. It's not good for the liquidity. It's not good for transparency. That just makes a system that is already abstract and complicated even worse, in my opinion.
A particular thing in the Norwegian debate is, of course, that the likes of Norsk Hydro and Alcoa, who is the big aluminium producers, they do not buy geos to document their consumption. They just refer to the national production mix.
Yeah,
so that's a mix, like an opt-out in a way, but I heard some people criticize that is not really possible anymore during according to international standards. I mean, do you?
No. I mean, I see. I mean, of course, when the aluminum industry came to the North, Iceland or Norway, they did it because of low power prices, and all of a sudden they have to pay if they want to be green. But that's just the rule. So if they want to make the claim, so what you're buying with the guarantee of origin is that you're allowed to make the claim that you're sourcing green electricity. That's the European law. That's the rule.
Absolutely. So I sense a feeling for a call for more professionalism, more regulatory kind of standardization as well. So that's the dream world here, Alexandra.
The EU Clean Energy Package sorted some things out, didn't it? And you got some more clearances of
I don't know. It depends if you're a very optimistic, realistic or pessimistic person. You can read a lot into this renewable energy directive also when it comes to guarantees of origin. I personally don't, or we in Greenfact, we don't see much big difference for guarantees of origin market than what we had or what we have now. Still, maybe a bit of a problem is that the countries, they are still allowed to make some of their own decisions. Do we want to auction guarantees of origin or not? Do we want to give them to subsidized assets or not? So there is a lot of, what the countries can still decide by themselves. So there is a lot of wiggle room, which makes this market overly complex, I would say. So there should be actually more standardization. That's what we were hoping for, actually.
A more rigorous framework there in which they can operate in.
Makes it much simpler for everyone, yeah.
Perfect, Alexandra. Thank you very much for joining the Montel Weekly Podcast this week. And
Thank you.
And thanks to you, Olav, as well, for your insights. Keep up to date with all our stories on Montel News and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you and goodbye.